When you were coming around, actually, I had actually talked to a friend of mine that's a major realtor and influencer in real estate in Arizona, and he sent over his best realtor, like the top performer in the company. This person was younger and came in and just presented this presentation. And one thing my stepfather didn't like was that this person did all the talking and never once asked him anything about him. Having Jessica Shrake here, thank you for taking time. Um, I met you because you helped me help my parents, my stepfather and my mom, transition from their house to an assisted living. And you were in competition with another realtor at the time, I remember. And my stepfather, I think, saw your flyer. I think that's how we ended up meeting, correct?
Yes, I have been mailing to that whole neighborhood. That was one of my target neighborhoods, just with a market update. And he was very impressed with the quality of what we were mailing. And, like see sometimes when I got to their house, they had several months of my mailings that they had been holding on to.
Yes, yeah, they did collect. They still do collect, by the way. They still collect a lot of paper. But ironically, it's interesting because mailers in today's age is not as popular. I wouldn't say we see a lot of people talk about them, but I guess it is pretty popular, especially in demographics where you have a seasoned group of people that kind of live by mail. They still collect their mail and they open their mail, have mail openers. A lot of people don't even know what that is, right? So,
Yeah.
so it's a smart move because you focused on a nerve that they're accustomed to, right? So I think that was actually a smart move because when you were coming around, actually, I had actually talked to a friend of mine that's a major realtor and influencer in real estate in Arizona, and he sent over his best realtor, like the top performer in the company. And I just had to bring this up because it ties into behavior science and neurolinguistic programming. This person was younger and came in and just presented this presentation. And one thing my stepfather didn't like was that this person did all the talking and never once asked him anything about him, about his life, his military experience. He didn't get a chance to be express who he is, or I would say be the Al Bundy, like showing the old football reels, basically. He didn't have a chance to do that. And so when she left, he was like, no. And I did recognize how you did. You did an amazing job understanding that age bracket and having a conversation and pulling out stories and actually responding to the comments. Like how people, like how why men fall in love with the woman is because she laughs at his bad jokes. And that's kind of like what you did. You were pretty much 100% engaged what he was saying, whether it made sense or not.
Well, thank you. And, I recall when I got there, of course, I had my things prepared, right? I knew the prices of the homes that had sold in their neighborhood, and I had all of that data. But I did what I always do, which is first ask them to show me their home and try and understand, just looking at things within the home. It might say, oh, did you serve our country? Right? Because there's things in the office that show that he was in the military, or there's art from Sedona in their case that was a memory to them. Before we even made it to the dining room table, your mom was telling me about, they had a framed picture of their dream home that they got to live in for years in Sedona. And we talked about how special that was. And then once we did sit down, I always say, well, look, I have my data and I have paperwork. But tell me what are you guys looking for? Why are you moving? Where are you going? What's going on in your world? Because, at the end of the day, anyone can come in and take pictures of a house and pick a price and put it up for sale. Um, and in our day and age, many agents don't like to admit this, but 99% of homes get found on the internet. If you can put halfway decent pictures together and you price the house within what the market is telling you, the home will probably sell, right?
I want to get into like what you see that people should know because I do believe this is a hidden thing that kind of creeps up on you and you just kind of survive it, as the days go by because you don't expect it. So what are some of the things that anybody should start thinking about, say a year out before they are seeing that their parents or might need to have some assisted living or downsize from a house they grew up in?
Yeah. Well, one of the things, and I would say first and foremost, is having that open conversation with mom and dad. And really it starts before we get there, right? I tease my husband someday, he's 6 years older than me. So I say, someday we're going to take away your keys. And, he just rolls his eyes and he's like, that's the worst day of my
Probably
life.
going, well, where are my keys?
But no one, very few of us want to lose our independence,
Yeah.
want to realize that the time has come where we need more care to live successfully than we have in the past. That's a very challenging place to be. And so, I would say that open communication. I was like, hey, mom, if something was to happen, I don't know where all of your paperwork is. So it really can start today because any of us should have those things gathered.
Yeah.
Start thinking about what's the life that you want to live going to look like when you get to that point? And are you preparing financially for it? Are you preparing with your legal documents? Who's going to have power of attorney? Does your estate planning attorney have a copy of everything? We can eliminate a lot of stress if we start doing those things today at my age and your age, making that part of our business of our family so that we aren't making all of those decisions on top of a decision about transitions into other living situations. Because it's not just a transition into that living situation, but like I always say, it's 50 years of memories and household items and goodwill stuff that is all piled up in the garage and the attic and the back of the closets.
But you brought something
So,
that is very important to think about. Like you say, like estate attorneys and things, is that they can easily Google or use AI to figure out what documents and things they need. There is also what I think what happens is people see it as being a lot of work, and so they try to avoid those things. So when you said you talk to your parents, are you actually asking them to do it, or do you actually think people should actually take time to do it with them? Because again, they'll find ways to avoid that kind of work. If
yeah.
it, so what do you think about that?
Well, I think that really if it's a matter of setting that appointment and going with them, that's probably the best.
Yeah.
If you're in town or you live in town with them, not every estate is complicated, right? And that's what a good attorney will do is sit down and understand what are your assets? What do you want to have happen as you transition those assets to your heirs? And they will ask you all sorts of questions you never thought of. I went and did that when I was single in my 40s and I had 3 children. And my estate attorney asked me some amazing
Yeah.
questions about setting things up for them, things that we wouldn't have thought of ourselves. That's why you hire a
Yeah.
professional.
There's another thing that I wanted to talk about that I want your honest opinion. You're a realtor, but what's your thoughts? Because I'm experiencing this with assisted living. Assisted living, do you feel like that's an honest industry for people that are on fixed incomes? And what are some ramifications or things to consider when you're moving into places like assisted living when it comes to like everything is an extra charge and you're paying rent versus owning now? So things
Yeah.
change. So give me some ideas of how you would talk to people about that.
Well, I think that's probably a reason to work with someone who's familiar with the assisted livings, whether it's one of those placement. There's some fantastic companies and individuals who do the placement services. They know more about these facilities than I do, certainly, and than anyone else, because they are in not just the one that their aunt went to or their mom is in, but they're in all of them every week. And so, I think it would be really important to maybe ask historically, what have those prices been over the last 5 years or 10 years, right? So you can see a track record. And then really pay attention. I know my mother-in-law was in assisted living for a period of time. And it's exactly what you said, right? There was this base cost,
Mhm.
and then it was kind of a la carte, which was nice in a sense, but it was like if her medication changed from 2 times a day to 3 times a day, there was a fee for that. And so I think it's important that you really look at those numbers and say and realize that most of our parents, as they go into an assisted living situation, they're going to enter with the lowest level of care that they're likely to need for the rest of their time in that home, right? And so you have to say, okay, but if we suddenly need bathing a couple times a week and we suddenly need medication administration and whatever else those fees are, what does the monthly commitment look like at that point? And are we in a position to make this decision and make this commitment?
Yeah, okay, that's a good thing to consider. So, it's interesting because you also brought up a really good point when you have a lifestyle of memories and you're moving into a space like from a 4,000 square foot, a 3,500 to a 1,200 square foot home. That's a lot of emotion that goes with that. I mean, I know my mom went through a lot of emotions with leaving all these things behind that she cherished. And that has to be a big part of it. How do you say families can deal with that? Should families should kids help with purging, or should we kind of, is it our responsibility to take in some of those memorabilias and hold on to them for them? Or what's your thoughts about that? I know it's a weird question, but these are emotional triggers that make sense to have a discussion about.
Well, I think the first thing to always be aware of, and I say this, I'm like the most clutter-free person you'll ever meet. I'm not a
Hey, your
sentimental.
backdrop looks amazing. Oh,
It's virtual, but so I'm not a stuffed person.
mm,
And so but my mom is, some of my sisters are, and I have to remind myself,
mm,
this is not about the tchotchke,
mm,
right? The vase. This is about the memory of when they got that vase,
mm,
what that stood for, the relationship with the person that they received it from, if it was a gift.
mm.
And so it's not about the stuff, right? When we come in and we look at our folks' stuff, including my mom and dad, love them so much. And, we have this conversation openly. It's not about those items, which to me, I'm thinking this item doesn't have any value. To
Yes.
them, the value is that relationship or that memory, that experience. And here's something I want to mention to anybody who might be watching this at some point in the future. Mom and dad sometimes are not going to appreciate all the effort that you're doing on their behalf. And I
Yeah.
have,
I'm gonna
I've,
reloop that one. That part right there, I'm gonna reloop over and over.
yeah, because, I actually just helped a family make this transition, get the property sold for them. Mom had needed to go into assisted living about 6 months ago, and it just took time for all the family to be able to come and take what they wanted of those, furniture and memories and photos and all the things, and get the home absolutely ready. And then we got it sold. And going through that process, unfortunately, this lady wasn't a super nice person. And so she was accusing her kids of stealing from her and really being very ungracious.
Yeah.
And it was hard because not only are her kids taking time out of their life, they're both working professionals. They already have a full life, they have very demanding careers, and they happen to be in the nice position of only being 20 minutes away,
Yeah.
unlike your situation when you were out of state.
Right.
But they are knocking themselves out evenings and weekends for weeks and weeks and weeks to attend to all the things that they chose to, do in-house instead of bringing in help. Because you don't have to do it yourself, but that was their choice. And all they were getting in response to that was accusations and really being chewed out. And that's really tough.
Let's talk about that because you did bring that up, and I meant to bring it up earlier. It just missed my mind here, but it did have an auction company, and that's another resource that people can look at where we actually were going to use them, and then the buyer came that wanted all the furniture. But that is a resource maybe people don't even realize is there, but you can actually have an auction company come in and auction just about everything you have in the house that you don't want, and then they take a percentage. And now, is that a organization that you assist with people, or is that something you just they find on their own?
I have a list of estate sale companies that you can interview. And here's what I want you to know.
Mhm.
Your furniture that you bought at Ethan Allen 25 years ago is not worth anything. So it
I
might have
don't
been crazy
understand
that,
that they rocked the kids to sleep in that thing.
yeah, so it could be Ethan Allen, Hendrenden, the high-end furniture, and it was custom, and that was a $3,500 couch
Yeah,
in 1995. It's worth $200 today on Marketplace.
right.
And so the estate sale companies, they're a business, right? And so generally they're going to have a minimum of how much money they have to make to come and do the work. And so you're going to pay them that minimum whether they get it from the sale of the items or not. And so for many families, unless there's valuables and collectibles and, generally that's going to be our more affluent families with true things that could, have intrinsic value that other people want, it's usually not going to be valuable enough to do an estate sale.
Yeah.
You know, another thing that I was able to help you with, if you remember, was your folks had filing cabinets and filing cabinets and filing cabinets full of documents from a prior business.
That's right. That's right.
And this wasn't just their own business, but it was potentially had, you know, sensitive information from past clients. And so we had a shredding service come to the house
Yeah.
and perform all of the shredding. And again, number one, I think it was like 200 or $250. I don't recall. But so we had the security and it saved you from literally having to empty all of these drawers into boxes, you know, like it was not that much money. And that's the thing that I think people need to understand is sometimes families, which I'm this way too, we're very DIY, right? I'm going to do it all myself. And there's just going to be so many things that need to be handled during this time that it's really great if you can outsource those things that probably are fairly low cost. Yes, it's going to cost some money, but it's going to free up 10 hours of your time for a, you know, a small fee to have this come and be handled the right way.
You brought up a really powerful point that there's so many resources that we need to lean onto. If you add the cost of that, compared to what it would cost you on time and your back and everything in between, it's worth it because you are downsizing and you're really trying to figure out the best, easiest path to that destination, emotionally as well as physically. So it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, so we have a person that actually help you with finding the right assisted living place, somebody who's going to look at cost and price. You have like shredding because that's a and it might not be a business, but it could just be your own file paperwork that you've kept for whatever reason, from houses you've bought to, insurance papers you've had, those types of things that you don't need any further because that house has been sold. And it's interesting when you do buy a house, you get a package and they give you this big package to take with you, and you can carry that thing for your whole life. And it has
Right.
all your private information in there. So those are kind of things that you just want to make sure you don't just lay around anywhere. And I think another thing you brought up was having a state attorney or somebody who knows the things that are important. But one of the biggest things I take away is all the valuable things, especially data, things that are carryable. Have it in one space or have it where it's accessible so you know where it is, so you don't have it in different drawers and different places and scattered everywhere. I think that's really important. My last thing I want to bring up is really the lady who helped us find the assistant living. Is that a service that is what's the title of that? Like what do people look for? What's the thing that they look for that when they're trying to find that person?
It's like a placement service. So
Okay.
residential or assisted living placement
Okay.
is the title that you would look for with that.
Okay. Now they have relationships with some of these assisted living places, so they know them personally, which I recall, but they're known as assisted living placement services where they will pretty much that's how they solicit themselves. So if you Google that or put that in AI, that's what would pop up. Okay.
And just so everyone knows, they're getting a fee. Generally, they get paid 1 month's rent
Okay.
when they successfully bring someone and who moves in.
By
That's
the assisted living place, though, not by you personally.
yes,
Okay.
correct.
All right. So another question is going to be a little off kilter, but it goes back to some of the options when it comes to these circumstances. One of the things that we went through before we met you, probably you were talking to my stepfather before this, but I was looking at assistant living, home care services. So that meaning they go through the house and they serve the family different things from cooking to cleaning to being available, those types of things. And it was a pretty good hard sell on how beneficial that is and saves money and those types of things. What's your comment or what should people consider before they choose one or the other? What are some of the options they need to think about when it comes to the two ways of looking at how to help their elderly parents, if you will?
So I think one of the things right off the bat is the home that they're in going to be the best situation for them safety wise, location wise, and financially, even if you're having that extra help, whether it's meals or bathing or whatever. And so realizing, like in the case of your stepdad and your mom, it was a large home with a lot of maintenance in the backyard, and the home was getting to an age where major repairs were going to be due in the next 3 to 10 years. Things like both air conditioners or three air conditioners, I think, on their property, a roof. And so you have to look at the total cost of being in the specific home that they are. Maybe in-home care is the right situation based on finances and needs and emotional needs, but maybe it's still not in that house, right? Maybe it's they need to sell the big house and move to a much more modest home that won't have those costs and will be easier for them to navigate. So just, I would say when you're looking at maybe a home health type option, even if you're going to go that route, make sure that you're really in the right home for that to be happening in.
Yeah, good point. Because if they have stairs and they're, that might not be the best home too. So I totally appreciate that. One of the things I do notice is technology for parents as they get older is it seems to break all the time. My mom's phone and my stepfather's phone are always broken. They need to go to Apple every week because something's wrong. And it's just their phone. My phone's been around a long time, never breaks.
Right.
Technology seems to be a really interesting thing for them. At the same time, I noticed a lot of people trying to take advantage of them in so many areas, from, calling, I'm from your bank, to things of that nature. Any ideas on what you've come up with?
It's challenging, and I think each family is going to have to figure this out based on how tech savvy mom and dad are, how many assets there are to protect, frankly.
Yeah.
I remember actually I was standing in your mom's kitchen with her, and we're doing something regarding, I think the house was on the market. I don't even recall why I was there. And her phone dinged with a text, and it said, and then somebody was calling and saying, "Hey, I need you to give me the code that we just texted you." Well, someone was trying to hack her Amazon account. And
Mhm.
I kind of rudely, but I
Imagine
was like,
that.
don't do that. That's a scammer. You need to
Right.
hang up. Not to be disrespectful, but realizing she didn't understand what was happening.
Yeah.
And of course, it was Amazon, but literally they can go buy whatever on her Amazon because it has the credit card saved there.
Mhm.
So, what educating our folks how things work. I know I've helped some of my elderly clients who didn't realize that they were paying multiple, $5 a month times five different game apps that were on their phone. And then they didn't know where to turn it off, right? And I had to go in and show them how to unsubscribe to this game that they were paying for.
Yeah.
So, consider using parental controls
Yeah.
to make it so that they can't accidentally pay for something that they don't realize is a subscription. Consider possibly, if you're in the finances, making sure that like their checking account doesn't automatically pull from their savings, so that if it does have fraud, all of their savings isn't at risk because someone hacked the checking account, things like that. And on that topic, so I've actually helped number of families with this. Um, Figure out what they're using for passwords, because many of our folks have put they're using online bill pay. Maybe they have logged into their electric provider and they've set up bill pay, and so that's going. But then if they become incapacitated, they're not communicating or they're not remembering. You don't know how to get into their electric account. You don't know how to get into their online banking. And so a lot of families are using like a physical paper password book, which probably isn't the most secure, but whatever you're going to use in your family, figure it out and have it be communicated. Um, uh, because it's really challenging when people can't figure out how to stop the payments going out because there's no record of those passwords.
That is so important, and thank you for bringing that up. It was one of those things that I had to learn the hard way with my mom and my stepfather. They never remember their passwords, and they write it on Post-it somewhere around the house, and then the cleaning lady throws it away or they lose it. And just funny thing is those commercials where the parent, you're like your parents kind of thing. To hear my stepfather and my mom talk to a customer service rep is hilarious. They start sharing their life story. I'm like,
Yeah.
just give them the PIN number, please. So it's the funniest thing. It's like they need somebody to talk to so bad. So I really appreciate that. You've given a lot of good information. I think this is really, I mean, what else can you share? Anything that we missed that is top of mind that really people should think about? Because you did an amazing job, like I said, with my stepfather and my mom, and we've always stayed in touch. You're extremely empathetic, and I would say empathic in a lot of ways. You pick up the right cues, and I really appreciate that about you. But from a sales perspective or a realtor who wants to focus on serving this community or even from the community itself, what else can you share or think of that might be useful for somebody to look at, not just now, but a year to come from now?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's really important when you're hiring an agent to make sure that there's two things there. I would say make sure that they are a full-time agent. That is because our market is changing. It changed during COVID. It was crazy. It's changed again very significantly. And the reason that matters is that a full-time agent should be doing enough of a volume of business that they know what is happening in today's market. Where there's a joke right now with us realtors that, buyers think that the market's going to crash and sellers think it's COVID. But the reality is somewhere in the middle. And so working with an agent who is full-time, who's experienced in the area where you have a property to sell, who is resourced to be able to bring you a cleaning company, a moving company, a shredding company, to know the things that you're going to need maybe before you've realized that you have those needs. And then the other thing I would say is if that agent is going to be working with your folks, especially if you're out of state or just out of right there in town, make sure that you're working with a person who is patient, who is willing to be respectful of some of the additional time challenges that are required. Because, I'll tell you, it's not from my perspective. So now I'm just wearing my business hat. It's not going to be the fastest transaction from, I think I started talking to your stepdad in July, and then we signed a listing agreement in October, and then they canceled it three weeks later. And then the following, I'm March, I might be off on my dates. They were ready and we put the house on the market. So this was like almost a year process of me being in relationship with them before the house was sold.
Right.
And so whether it's patience in that aspect, whether it's realizing that sometimes, everyone else, we just do electronic signatures, right? Hey, Julian, it's a DocuSign over to you,
Right.
it's right there. Sometimes we get to do that, and sometimes we have to talk them through 5 times how to get it signed. And then sometimes it's like, you know what, I'm just going to bring that over to you to sign. And so I remember that was one of the questions your stepdad asked when I first met him is, well, where do you work? And I said, well, I just live, a couple miles from here. And he really wanted to know where I lived. And I did live about 3.5 miles north of their property. And I said, right here off this highway, this cross street. So they were, I don't know, maybe a 10-minute drive from
That
my
was very
house.
important to him. That was very important to him. You lived in the
It
community.
was important to him. And I think that other agent who does a lot of business, she's probably very good. I don't know her personally. When he asked her where she lives, she just wanted to say close by.
Mhm.
And so, whatever it is that's important to your folks, if that is what's important and they're going to be part of this decision process, then you got to honor that. But
Yeah.
finding someone, who's going to be patient with them through the whole process. There are many top producing realtors who are very good at what they do, and they are very transactional, and they do a large volume of business, and they do not have systems and processes set up that accommodate for handholding and
Yeah.
that accommodate for going over to do a wet signature on an addendum, and it's a 30-minute visit because you're going to get some more of the life story. And so, finding someone who they understand that that's going to be the process of working with your folks is going to bring a lot less stress and disappointment to an already stressful time.
I just spoke with a major real estate company here in Arizona, in Dallas a few weeks ago, and it was like about 400 realtors there. And they were all over from Keller Williams, EXP, and everything in between. They had me come in and speak about the power of authenticity, which is lost in this digital, and I would say I call it Gen Z age, but it really is just a tech digital age. And the need for feeling like authenticity and how our body tells us what's genuine and what's not. It's in that sense, beginning of time, we had this instinct in our body. And so sharing how to do this with people is fascinating how they can peg it very quickly, how much they pick it up, but they're not aware of how they don't give it. And that's what's fascinating about it. I come in with this expectation that I'm a salesperson. I have this certain ego about who I am and what I can provide. What I pick up from that is, okay, you're coming in trying to throw your weight around and tell me how important you are, but I want to tell you how important I am. So now there's this fight of will that's happening
Mm.
that's never discussed versus going in and just appreciating something about this person, not thinking about myself, but looking at this person like you did with my stepfather and appreciating his background. Oh, no, and talking about his life, but intentionally authenticity listening comes across. And it did really good. And I give you that long speech because it's so important that people realize you're not a salesperson. You're your own brand. You represent the humanness that is actually needed in a day where everything is 2D and it's really hard to feel that oxytocin that should happen through interaction with people. It's really hard to get it now because we're inundated with wanting to feel good through dopamine so fast that we lost the ability to connect. So I think you did a really good job. I think, you're a great realtor. If I ever move back to Arizona, which probably won't happen, but if I ever did, it's just too hot. And Jessica, it's just
It's off.
it's too hot. I'm sorry. It's just too, and, but again, I'm from the beach, so Texas is not any better, to be honest with you.
You have the humidity there. We don't have that.
Yeah, you don't. You don't. You have that microwave heat that just burns even at night. But so, like, you serve Arizona. So do you have a network of people that you actually work with for other states outside of Arizona that could be leveraged if a person has a need for this?
I do. And it's one thing that I offer my clients is if they are moving out of state or maybe they mom and dad are out of state and they don't know someone there, how do you pick a great realtor? Well, I think it's ask another realtor who a good realtor is. So I have a great network of people that I'm friends with, that I do business with, that really take care of people the way I would take care of people. So I'm always happy to give a referral to another agent who I know is really going to do a phenomenal job for you.
Okay, good to know. So people can reach out to you and you can let them know who you know in certain states and stuff. Okay. And how do people find you if they wanted to find you? I know how to find you, but how do other people find you?
Yep. So I'm Jessica Shrake on Instagram. If you're an Instagrammer, my handle is AZ Neighborhood Finder. And you can find my Google reviews, Jessica Shrake Realtor. I'm on Facebook more. I think that's kind of my age is more Facebook than the other platforms. So come friend me and I'll keep you entertained with what's going on in Arizona.